Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Susan. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. It's nice to be here with you.
Well, it's great having you. Susan, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay, I am 58 years old. I live in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. Basically grew up in Kentucky. Lived in California for about 18 years in the Bay Area. While I was there, I worked in the entertainment industry and did security work. And then I moved back home in 1993 and have been back here ever since.
Sounds like you've had an exciting life.
Yeah, I could probably write a book.
Yeah, from sharing some of the things you shared with me in the I'd say you could. You've had some interesting things happen, no doubt about that. Before you had your encounter, what were your thoughts on the possibility of creatures like Dogmen or Sasquatch existing?
None. I absolutely did not believe that they were real. I thought they were a myth. I thought that werewolves or dogmen were due to mold and people hallucinating in the French countryside in the 11th century. There was no way that these things could be real. There's just no way. I didn't accept it.
Yeah, the mold you're talking about, I think you're talking about what's called ergot. It grew on breads and things like that, and when people ate the bread, they hallucinated and they thought they were seeing things that weren't really there. A really creepy effect.
Exactly. And I love history, and especially European history. And I had read articles regarding this and, the man in France that had killed all these women and thought he was a werewolf. And I thought that, okay, that's just what it was. It was somebody who ate moldy bread and went crazy, and that's the end of that story. They're not real. They don't exist.
Well, it sure would be nice and convenient if that was what the truth was, but we both know that's not what happened, and that's not the truth.
I know now. I am a believer now.
Yeah, you do know now. Please tell us about Darby.
So, a friend of mine in California had a ranch, and I'll tell you exactly where it was. It was in the Murphy, Angel Camp, Copperopolis area. And we would go up there and spend weekends, and there was this huge hill that was up on his property. And he used to tell us that he had a Sasquatch up there. And having a wicked sense of humor, I named him Darby, and I used to relentlessly tease him about it. I didn't believe Sasquatch was out there. I didn't care what anybody said. Again, they don't exist. And I feel terrible because in the back of my mind, I could tell that he really, truly did believe that this was on his property. And whenever he would leave to go up to the ranch, I would say things like, hey, tell Darby I said hi, and tell Darby we'll be up next weekend, and teased him relentlessly about it. I now realize that I owe that man a huge apology, and that I'll be making shortly to him in person. I will never, ever doubt what anybody tells me they see again. Ever.
Well, I hope you don't beat yourself up too much. I mean, after all, you behaved the way most people would have behaved in that situation. You just didn't know back then. You sure do know now, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I definitely know now.
Yeah, I'd say you do. One summer when you were a kid, you were staying with your grandparents and wanted to camp out, but your grandmother wouldn't let you. Why wouldn't she let you do that?
Well, it was kind of a crazy thing because my grandmother was, she's down in Corbin, Kentucky, down in the country. And, they're just kind of real simple people down there. And she's real sweet. I never saw her lose her temper, ever. And the piece of property that they lived on, they had a cabin. And about 10, 15 feet outside the back door, something like that, is where the beginning of a mountain was. There was a sheer granite wall there. And then from there, it tapered back, and it was all woods, and it was at an actual mountain. And I guess I was about, I'm trying to remember, I'll say somewhere between 7 and 9 years old at the time. And we were spending the summer down there, and I decided I wanted to camp out in the backyard. And I asked my mom, and she said yes. And so I went and got my little blankie and my little pillows and stuff, and I'm making my little camp back there. And the next thing I know, my grandmother comes out the back door, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to sleep out here tonight." She says, "No, you're not." And she said, "There's a hairy man up on that hill. He will come down and get you." And I'd never seen my grandmother angry or forceful before. And she actually grabbed me by the arm and dragged me into the house. And she said, "You are absolutely not sleeping out here. You are sleeping in this house." And it was very upsetting to me because I had never seen my grandmother like that before. But at the same time, I remember thinking, she's talking about some crazy, wild mountain man. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking an old man with a long beard, long hair, you know, just living wild up in the mountains. Now I realize what it was she was really saying. You know, that there was like a Sasquatch or something up on that mountain that she was afraid was going to come down and get me. And then years later, on another trip down there, all the local kids, they would get together and they would camp out in the cemetery. And I wanted to go with them. You know, we were in our teens by that time. And she was adamant, absolutely not. You are not camping out. You are not sleeping out ever. And it terrified her, the thought of us sleeping out in the open somewhere.
It sure makes you wonder if she had a Sasquatch encounter of her own that made her feel that way.
You know, again, it was one of those things where, as a child, it mystified you and it confused you, and you kind of look at them and go, "Well, gee, what's that about?" But then time goes on, you put things out of your mind. And it wasn't until this situation happened to me here that suddenly that situation with her came into like a clear view. I realized then that she really was very frightened of something up on that hill coming down and getting her grandchild. And like I said, it's taken me 50 years to actually really realize how scared she was.
Yeah, sounds to me like she must have had some sort of experience with something in that area to make her act that way. What it was, I guess we don't know, but from the way she responded, it sounds like it must have been a Sasquatch.
You know, unfortunately, she passed away about 20 years ago. But like I said, she was one of those real strong country kind of women. They're sweet, but they're tough. You know, there's not too much that shakes them up. And that shook her up. It scared her.
Yeah, when you see someone like that who's that tough respond that way to something like that, yeah, it's going to be pretty unsettling, especially when you're a kid the way you were.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things, you know, as you grow older, you go on with your life, you put it behind you. You don't think about it until, as I told you, you come face to face with reality.
Exactly, until you have an experience like the one that you had. You tried to suppress your encounter until recently. Why did you decide to come forward now and talk about it?
There's been a few things that have happened in the last 6 months here in the neighborhood that I live in. My encounter actually took place pretty close to where I live, about a mile away. And part of me, again, you know, my background with my family is they're police officers and they're military, and I worked security. And you have to be very aware of your surroundings. You have to make clear, concise choices when things go bad. You can't panic. You have to have your sense about you at all times, is the way that I was raised. And when I had my encounter, I actually feel like my brain shut down. It just could not accept what had happened. Again, it comes back to cold reality is what you're taught, what is preached to you, and then your reality is busted. And everything that you grew up believing it doesn't apply anymore. Like we talked about, there really are monsters under your bed sometimes. And then what happened in the last 6 months, we started having problems within our neighborhood of something moving around through the backyard. And it's big. You can tell it's whatever this is, it's big. And I actually witnessed it kind of like weaving back and forth back in the far part of my yard one night. And other people have seen this dark figure jumping over fences. And then the next thing that happened was we have a post here. It's called Northern Kentucky Pet. And all at once we started seeing notices where people's pets had gone missing. And coyotes coming down into the neighborhood from the area where my encounter took place are now down here in our neighborhood. But it's like I explained to you that I've seen good, healthy coyote in California, and they were fairly large. I've seen medium-sized ones over in Ohio. But the ones that we have coming down here are skeletal, like they're starving. They're sickly looking. And that's not normal. We've had situations where we've witnessed spotlights going on behind houses. And a sheriff's deputy and I one night witnessed a large black figure jumping a fence for the house across the street from us. So we know that there's something down here in our neighborhood, and I just get this terrible feeling of dread sometimes. I can't go into my backyard anymore, and that was always my sanctuary. I actually get physically ill at the thought of going back there. In the summertime, I love leaving my kitchen door open. I can't do that anymore. And as I explained to you earlier, I had to shoot and kill one of my dogs because I believe that what was back there terrified it so much the night that happened that it literally tried to chew itself out of the door and attacked my other dog, trying to get away from whatever was back there.
Having to deal with all this in such a short period of time, that is an awfully tough pill to swallow. Not easy at all to deal with. No.
And it's like I explained to you, my Smoky Bear was a great dog, and to anybody listening, he was an Anatolian. And, I have to stress that because these dogs are fearless. They're fearless fighters. They will fight to the death. And that dog went absolutely crazy that night from fear, trying to get away from whatever it was in the backyard. And, as I said, I had to shoot him. There was no stopping him. My other dog got in his way of him trying to get out and away from whatever that was, and he attacked him. So I know that there is something down here in our neighborhood, and I really believe it is what I had my encounter with.
Well, I definitely hope it's not the Dogman you had that encounter with, but after you've shared all the things you've shared with me, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if it was, unfortunately. Speaking of which, let's talk about that encounter now. In 2013, you had an encounter with a creature you called That Thing. Please tell us about that encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Sure. It was like the last week of November. I worked up in Sharonville, Ohio, and one of the ways to come home was down 275. And it was really, really cold that night. We were having one of those polar vortexes, and I had trouble starting my car. And also, I have to tell everybody this, I'm a heart patient. I've had open heart surgery, so I have wires and stuff that are holding, my rib cage and everything together, and that plays a big part in what happens later on. So I had to take my time warming up the car. What normally takes 30 minutes to get home took almost an hour. So it was about 7:30 around there. And I bring up the heart part because I had taken Lasix before I left work. And if anybody who takes that, you know that when it kicks in, you have to go to the bathroom right then. There's no waiting. And I had just gotten off my exit which is on Taylor Mill Road. And I knew I wasn't going to make it the next mile down to my house. So where I live at, where that exit is up on top of a hill. And there is an even larger hill to the left. And that's where this area of Fidelity Investments was located at. Now, it's a beautiful area. Years ago, it used to be a huge farm, but they bought it and they put a couple of office buildings up there. There's walking trails up there. And it's also a shortcut from Taylor Mill over to another very populated area, which is called 3L Highway. So you can cut through on this drive called Magellan Drive. So I made the turn to go up into Fidelity. So I knew I just had to pull over and go to the bathroom. There just wasn't no waiting. I go up to Magellan, and off on my left is a little dirt driveway, and it's actually crescent shaped. And when you go and you turn on this little dirt driveway, it actually goes up. You're going up a hill. And in between you and the road, there are bushes on the left-hand side till you get to a certain point, and then there's guardrails. On the right-hand side of the road, which faces the road, there are bushes there, and there's just enough room for one car. So I get up there, get out of my car, and I'm looking around, making sure there's nobody there, there's no traffic coming, go ahead, do my business. And stood up, and I'm doing my pants up, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if I heard something or just a feeling. But I looked behind me, and literally about 5 feet away from me, there was 3 deer there huddled up together. And I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, why aren't they running? And then I realized they weren't looking at me. They were looking across the road. Now, from where I am, I'm up on a little hill. You go down, there's a 2-lane road there. And then across the road is another set of bushes. And about 50 feet to the left of those is a street light, but it's a very dim street light there. But back behind those bushes, there's also trees back there. It's like a little wooded area. And then that goes down a hill to an area called Crosby Lane. And then from there, that goes down another hill, and you're back down on the main street, which is Taylor Mill. So I'm looking back across the road and trying to figure out what the deer were looking at. And all at once I saw this movement. And I wasn't quite sure what it was I was seeing. I could see this outline, and it was huge. I'm 5'5", and I've been down there, and those bushes are over my head. And now this is winter. There are some leaves, but they were pretty bare. And from the street lights, all at once I realized I'm seeing this outline of this massive creature. I could see it from the chest up clearly. But again, it was in shadow, so I'm seeing outline. I realized that it has dog ears. And it's still not connecting in until I see those ears turn. And then it growled at me. And I felt that growl in my chest. My whole chest vibrated. And I honestly believe that's because of the wires in my chest. I felt the vibration. And I don't know if it was instinct or just dealing with dogs and training them. The next thing I did was I jumped down to where I was on all fours. And I don't know why, but I growled back at it. And as I'm watching it, it turned its head to the right towards the streetlight. It raised its head up, and I could see its snout, and I could see it sniffing the air. And then it turned around, its head turned around, and it looked at me again. And by that time, I had stood back up. And I don't know why, but I shooed the deer I was like, go. And when I looked back at where it was standing, it had moved. It had moved to my right. The terror I felt was something I've never experienced in my life before. It's like I told you, I really truly believed I was going to die that night. And I felt that it was going to the right because there were more bushes down there. And the way where I was at with my car, there were bushes that kind of cut off the view of the street. So it could cross the street, but I wouldn't see it if it crossed the street. And I really felt like it was going to circle behind me. And I quickly got in my car because thank God I did not turn it off. And I got in my car and I took off and I shook all the way home. I was shaking so bad I was weeping. I could not get in my house fast enough and went immediately into the bathroom where I thought I was going to throw up. A few days later, now I spoke to my husband that night when he got home, and he knew something was wrong. And he asked me what had happened. And as I explained to you, my husband is one of those people. He has had experiences of his own and other ways. So he's a believer in those things that he has seen personally. If he doesn't see it, it's not real to him. So I didn't tell him what I saw. What I did tell him was that, I told him about stopping up there, going to the bathroom, seeing the deer. I told him that something was very, very wrong up there. And I told him that I was never, ever going back up there again. Ever. And a few days later, we were in the car, and we had to go over to Walmart. And he was going to go his normal way, which is a shortcut up through Fidelity. And I'm telling him, no, I don't want to go up there. No, that place terrifies me. No, I don't want to do this. And he's like, well, let's just come up here and look around and see what's going on. And every hair on my body stood up. I got that same feeling of fear and dread. I was stomping on the floorboard like I was trying to get to the gas to get out of there. And I have never gone back up there since. It's like I told you, I don't care if Jesus Christ comes down from the mountain to preach a sermon. I am not going to be there ever again, ever.
That's not easy to see something like that. You spend your whole life being told that monsters don't exist. One night you find out that they do. That's not easy to deal with.
No, and it's like I explained to you, I actually felt like the best way I know to describe it is I actually felt like my psyche got shattered. Every belief I ever had was just shattered.
Yeah, we like things to be predictable and easy to understand in life, but when they go outside those bounds, yeah, that's when things start to fall apart pretty quickly. You just said that you didn't tell your husband about seeing the Dogman the night when you got home and saw him, but have you told him about that since?
No, because I kind of didn't know where or how to start. It's one of those things of, how do you start that conversation? Honey, remember the night that I got terrified up, in the wooded area? And by the way, it was a Dogman werewolf that I saw. How do you start that conversation? And that was why I finally, like I told you, I researched a lot of people that say that they're experts in this. And there's just a lot of them that the things they were saying I just couldn't get into. I thought they were too outlandish. I felt like they weren't dealing with the subject seriously enough until I came upon you. And I listened to several of your shows, and then I made the decision that you were going to be the first person that I spoke to about this. And it's like I told you, the first step was I needed affirmation. I needed to know that I didn't stroke out. I wasn't hallucinating. It was real.
Well, I'm so glad you did decide to reach out to me. You said you never did tell your husband about that encounter, but have you told anyone else about it?
No, but I kind of took a first step, as I told you today, and that was in speaking to my neighbor, the deputy. I finally just asked him, what do you think you saw that night jumping the fence at our neighbor's house across the street? And he said he wasn't sure. He said he just knew it was big and it was black, but I could tell that it bothered him, that what he saw, just by the look on his face, I could tell he's been thinking about it. So I think probably my next step is I'm going to ask him, does he think it was an animal? And then maybe open the door and go from there, since we both saw it. And I think if I can have that conversation with somebody that has seen it and witnessed it, then I'll be able to go on and have the conversation with my husband. Like I said, my husband's a really, really great guy, but he's very analytical, nerdish. He has to have proof before he will accept things. And I even told you, he had a UFO encounter. Now, you can talk to him about UFOs all day long. He's right there with you because he saw one. But for anything else, he'll listen to you, but he's kind of, I'm not so sure, I have to see it, that kind of thing.
Well, I can appreciate him feeling that way. If it would benefit you any, I could always set it up so he's in a position where he most likely will see a Dogman. It's up to you on that. If he has an interest in seeing one, I'm pretty sure I could set that up.
Well, that's something that we may have to do in order for him to recognize what it was I saw. But again, like I said, he knows that something very traumatic happened. We've been together a long time, and as a matter of fact, we were high school friends. He's known me almost all my life. And he knows I don't get upset that easily, and I don't freak out about things. And in the business that I used to work in, I've had terrible things happen around me. I've had people get shot and knifed, and, I've had women come and tell me that they were raped at concerts and what have you, and, have to deal with these things. And he knows I'm not one of those people that falls apart like that. And I did that night. I have to admit, I fell apart.
Well, let me tell you, even the toughest people tend to fall apart when they come face to face with one of these things, so please don't hold that against you. Is there a physical feature that the Dogman had that shook you up most?
To be perfectly honest with you, it was the massiveness of this creature, the shoulders. It's like I told you, it had a wrestler's type of neck. It was so thick. I could tell that. And then the ears. When I saw the ears turn, I was like, my God, this is real. This is a living thing. And then when it lifted its head and I could actually see its snout, I remember thinking, my God, there is no way I would ever be able to get this thing off of me if it comes across the road.
Yeah, if that happened, you definitely wouldn't have had a chance of doing that. You only got a chance to see this Dogman from the shoulders up because of the bushes it was in. Right.
I mean, I could see an outline through the bushes, but it was blurred because of the bushes and the leaves and what have you. I could see like a darker image back there behind the bushes, but it wasn't clear like the shoulders were. I mean, I could definitely see muscle structure. You could see bulges, but it wasn't like defined. It's like more like a ripple effect, if you know what I mean. You could see a ripple effect in the outline.
Yeah, being as dark as it was that night and it being in the bushes, yeah, you just did the best you could to make out details, so I think you did a great job with that. How was the size of its head in proportion to its body?
Its head was huge, but not overly large. In other words, like I told you, when it turned its head, I could actually make out an outline of the jaw muscle as it opened its mouth and it raised its head up to sniff the air. I've heard some people say in various interviews, oh, its head was so broad it covered its shoulders. No, this wasn't like that. It was proportionate to the body, to me, is what it looked like. It was big, but it wasn't expansive. Like the jaws, the cheeks, the sides. I've listened to a lot of interviews trying to come to grips with what I saw, and some of the descriptions just didn't make sense to me. When they talk about these huge heads, and like I said, it covered the shoulders, and this didn't do that. I would say it was large. It was a large canine head, but its largeness fit the body, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. You still live about a mile from Fidelity Insurance. Why haven't you moved?
Basically because my husband is 2 years away from retiring, and we own several pieces of property in the area. And our goal through our investments and what have you in our real estate was to sell off properties and be able to retire down to Florida. But he can't retire for 2 more years. Otherwise he's going to take a huge hit on the investments and that kind of thing, which is, money we need in order to do what we want to do in the future. And I keep telling myself, come on, you're a tough girl. You can take it. Just stay out of that area. Everything will be fine. You can suck it up for 2 years. Until, like I said, recently, what started happening about 6 months ago. And, I'm having a real hard time with the fact that it might be in our neighborhood now. Again, I keep telling myself, you can get through this. You know what's out there. You know to be careful. Don't go sit in the backyard anymore. Don't sit out on the front porch anymore. And just, I'm aware. I watch. But again, like I told you, I also feel like it's taking a physical toll too. I think I'm actually having physical illnesses starting because I just feel so tense and on watch all the time. But that's the reason why we haven't moved. It's just financially not feasible for us to do this at this time. And some people will say, well, that's stupid. If you're that frightened, go ahead and move. But at the same time, this is what we planned for, what we dreamed for, what he's worked so hard for. And I just have a hard time making that decision to cut all of those plans short. Like I said, after he's worked so hard his whole life to be able to do this.
I can appreciate you feeling that way, but hopefully you'll relocate maybe miles away into a more urban area that's more developed or something so that you just flat out get away from that property. I hope you do that.
I've been thinking about it. We do have another property that, like I said, it's a rental property. It is actually more in town, if what you want to call town. And I have actually, in the back of my mind, thinking rather than starting the rehab on that property to get it ready for sale, maybe we should move into that property and start the rehab on this house and getting it ready to sell first. So I am thinking that.
Well, that sounds like a sound strategy to me. I hope you do that. For the last couple of years, you tried to suppress memories of that encounter. Do you think you helped yourself or hurt yourself by doing that?
I actually think I really hurt myself. I really do. I ended up having to retire from my job the February after this. And it was just due to all at once my blood pressure just started going sky high. And I started having periods of dizziness because of the blood pressure and just, like I said, that overall feeling of dread, feeling not comfortable here in my own house. And it started to where I don't sleep very well and I don't eat very well. So I think I did myself harm by not researching it at the beginning, trying to find out more about what it was that I saw and what took place. And again, reaching out to somebody that could give me affirmation that I wasn't crazy and help guide me through this.
Well, like I said before, I'm so glad you found me. You think you would have been killed had you not handled yourself the way you did that night. What do you think it was that saved you?
Well, it's like I told you, when I first contacted you. I know I did not scare it. I don't think for 1 second I scared this thing at all. I think I got in between it and its prey, I think it was going after those deer. I actually think that me dropping down and growling back at it, like I told you, I said, I don't think I scared it. I think maybe I might have confused it or stopped it for a second. It's like, here's this crazy woman down on her hands and knees, and I'm growling at her, and she's growling back at me. And, like I said, that's just pure instinct. And that's why I train my dogs. And I really think I was thinking of it as a dog. And it was like trying to establish who was alpha in that situation. And then realizing what this thing was, it's like, oh my God, you're going to die. Leave. Run.
Yeah, when you're placed in a situation like that, it's hard to know how you're going to react. At first glance, it does seem awfully strange that anyone would drop down to their hands and knees and growl at this thing the way you did, but who's going to ever expect to see something like a Dogman? So since that was in your training, since you're used to handling situations that way, I guess it's only natural that you fell back onto that. After all, everyone's got a plan until they get punched or run into a Dogman.
Right, exactly. Like I told you, in my mind, I'm still thinking dog, regular canine. I'm not thinking of the more deadly aspects of what it was I was looking at. I'm thinking, dog, I'm going to scare it off. No, I think it was trying to come up behind me. I really believe that.
Now that we've had our conversations, how sure are you that it would have killed you if it had the chance?
Well, after talking to you and listening to some other interviews, you say that the likelihood of it actually killing me was probably pretty remote. That it probably wanted to just terrify me out of its territory. And it did that. I'm never going back there again, ever. Now I kind of don't believe that that was its purpose when it started moving off to the right of me. Again, I think it was just moving off and probably just giving me a chance to get out of there so it could continue on with getting to the deer.
Well, understand, and I think I did a pretty good job of driving this point home in the pre-interview. I don't think it makes a difference whether it was able to sneak up on you or not. If it had killing you on its mind, that's what it would have done that night. The fact that it didn't even lay a claw on you, I think that says everything about its MO that night. It wanted to terrify you, but it just didn't have any interest in harming you.
Yeah, and it's like I explained to you, after being up there, and again, this comes back to dog training. After I went to the bathroom and I realized what I was looking at, it's amazing all of the things that go through your mind in such a short span that I immediately thought, oh my God, I just peed in its territory, which is a challenge. And its food is standing right behind me. And it's like all these thoughts, it's like lightning speed, how fast these thoughts come into your mind. And I think that was partly why I thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die up here on this hill, and no one is going to hear me scream. That's how isolated it is up there.
Yeah, sounds like it is a pretty remote place. And I can understand why you'd feel that urinating like that when it was around might have caused it to think you were challenging its superiority, but I've got no doubts that it did realize that you were a female and not male, and consequently it didn't feel that that was what you were doing. At least I hope that's what was going on.
But like I said, that thought doesn't enter your mind at the time that you're looking at this thing that can just kill you with one swipe. You're thinking, oh my God, what have I just done?
Oh, sure, that's only natural. Your brains ooze out of your ears when you're in a situation like that. You're just reduced to basic functions at that point, so most people aren't going to be able to think clearly. Now that you've had time to analyze your experience, do you wish you would have done anything differently that night?
Yeah, I wish I'd continued on down to my house.
I'll bet.
I wish I'd had a stronger bladder and, just made it down to my house, which is just a mile down the road. And again, for anybody listening, I will say, if you want to get a view of the area and the feel of the area, all you have to do is just Google Fidelity Investments in northern Kentucky and take the satellite view, look for Magellan Drive, And off on the left-hand side, you're going to see that little dirt incline, and you're going to see how remote it is, how wooded it is. And then if you follow down the hill, you're going to start going into neighborhoods where these woods actually back up into these yards I'm telling you about, where we keep seeing things. The other thing that I wanted to mention, too, was the amount of wildlife that used to be up there. I don't think I said this, but we used to see herds of deer up on the hillside, and you would see flocks of wild turkey. And they were everywhere, and the deer were everywhere. It was very populated. And you'd see foxes running down the road, and tons of rabbits and raccoons and all kinds of things. And then, like I said, about 3 years ago, all at once we started noticing that all the wildlife was disappearing up there. Now there's nothing. There is nothing up there. And I've had people mention, gee, I go up there, I look, and that was the thing. People used to go up there, they'd leave corn and stuff for the deer. And I've had people tell me they haven't seen deer up there in years. And this area is very populated with deer. They're everywhere around here, but they're not up there. And we've got starving coyotes down here in our neighborhood. And now our pets are missing.
Well, I can only imagine how much food something like that would go through in short order, so if that's what's responsible for it, it only makes sense.
There's a great water source up there, too. There's sprinklers everywhere up there. They go off at the same time every night. So they've got plenty of water, and there's berry bushes everywhere up there. And I'll tell you what people used to think. We used to think that, gosh, that would be a great place for homeless people to go and live up there, and they'd be able to live off the land with the deer and the turkeys and all that. And we actually thought for a long time maybe that was what was happening up there. But I don't think so anymore. I think I saw exactly what has taken out the wildlife up there.
You told me that initially you wanted me to tell you that you hadn't seen that Dogman. Why'd you want me to do that?
I think I wanted my worldview to stay exactly as it had always been, because I always thought that, like I explained to you, when you're young, you think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And you go through life thinking nothing can touch you, nothing can harm you. If you're careful, if you're alert, watch your surroundings, you're going to go through life and you're going to be fine and okay, and nothing bad is ever going to happen to you. And that's just basically almost everybody's worldview. And I wanted to continue believing that. I wanted to continue believing that nothing bad is going to happen. There really aren't monsters. You can go sit in your backyard and enjoy the summertime with your dogs, and you don't have to be afraid to go out your front door. I wanted to have that security back again. And in the back of my mind, I knew what you were going to tell me. But I was hoping that you were going to tell me you can go back to your safe little world. Everything's okay. Don't worry, darling. And that's not real. That's not the way it is.
Well, you know what they say, you can't fool yourself. I'm glad you've reached the acceptance phase of this. When you have an experience like that, it's easy to think that it's going to be all negative, but having had that experience, do you see any positive things you can take away from it?
Oh, yeah. It's like I told you, like with my friend and Darby. Like I said, I have a wicked sense of humor, and I teased him relentlessly about what he would tell me he was seeing. And I now have a better sense of sympathy and empathy. I will never, ever doubt anything anybody tells me again about this. I will do my best to help them through it. I will explain to them what I went through and how I felt, just so they know they're not alone. And again, I keep coming back to this point. But, when you have this experience, you really doubt your sanity. And I've questioned my sanity for 3.5 years. And again, part of that is my fault. I understand that because I didn't talk to anybody. But I've made up my mind that I will make it easier for anybody that ever wants to talk to me about it. I'll never doubt them. I'll never tell them they're crazy. I'll never tell them that they didn't see what they saw. I know better. It's there.
Whether someone else believes you or not, that doesn't really matter. At least you know the truth now.
Right. People can laugh at me all they want. I don't really care. And I've heard people say that they didn't tell anybody because they were afraid of the scrutiny that they would get and that kind of thing. And that did play a part in I kept silent about it also. Because I really thought people were just going to look at me and go, "You're nuts, girl. What have you been smoking?" And that kind of thing. And again, that comes back to that loss of control, that feeling of weakness, and having people look at you like there's something wrong with her. She's lost her mind. But now I've made up my mind that I don't really care what anybody thinks now. I know what I saw. I know what happened. I know what's happening right now.
Well, I'm glad you've seen the light. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference at all what someone else thinks about whether you had that encounter or not. You know you had it, you know dogmen are real, and that really is all that matters.
Right, and when we first talked about doing the interview, we were going to do it very anonymously because when I first spoke to you, I still was coming to grips with this and coming to terms with what happened. And that's why I just made up my mind during the course of this interview to tell people where it happened. Go to the satellite view. Look at it. Look at the neighborhood down the hill that I live in. I just made up my mind that it's real. It's there. And stay out of there. Don't go up there.
Yeah, it does sound like a good area to stay away from. Your husband doesn't understand why you do some of the things you do because of that experience. What kind of toll has that taken on you?
It's been a little stressful because I couldn't actually completely explain to him. And again, we're due to go on vacation later on in the summer, and we're going to go to Gatlinburg. And I've been down there before. I love the area. It's beautiful. I love the Smoky Mountains. But suddenly I started becoming afraid of going down there. All I could think about was, you're going back into the woods. And I've never been afraid of being in the woods. We've always gone camping and fishing and boating. And suddenly the thought of being down there in the mountains, in the woods, started to terrify me. And all at once, deliveries started coming to the house that he didn't understand. And it's like I told you, I've bought 3 huge canisters of bear spray. I've bought 2 canisters of police-grade pepper spray. And I have 2 air horns. And he's looking at these deliveries, and he's like, "Are you getting ready for a war? What's going on here?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, the bears down there." I'm not really concerned about the bears down there. I'm concerned about what we might run into walking the dog at night around the hotel, which is in the middle of town, but I'm still afraid of walking the dog in the middle of the night down in the Smoky Mountains. So I bought an arsenal, basically.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, as long as he doesn't ask you when the M1 Abrams is going to show up, I guess everything's okay.
Well, that might have been next.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to tell me that was going to be showing up next Wednesday.
Yeah. If I thought I could afford it, probably. Yeah, I think it would take something like that. And it's like I told you, when I explained to you what was happening in the backyard and with my dogs and all that. And I told you, I said, I've gotten the shotgun out and gone to the back door. I was going to protect my dogs. And you advised against, unless I had something extremely powerful, don't shoot. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, you're probably right. Again, I think I'm a pretty rough, tough girl, but, I had to really be honest with myself. I'm like, would you freeze up in that situation? Would you be able to protect your dog? What would you do? Are you going to piss it off more?
Yeah, there is a good possibility that you would just piss it off more. I always tell people, don't shoot a dogman unless you're convinced you're going to die anyway. Because if for whatever reason it planned on not attacking you before you shot at it or shot it, yeah, once you do shoot at it or shoot it, it almost assuredly is going to come and try to get back at you. So that's not a good thing.
Right, and it's like I told you, I questioned you heavily when we first spoke about it being down here in the yards, and I even asked you, I was like, after having to go to the bathroom up there and the way it sniffed the air, I asked you, was there a possibility that it has my scent? Is that why this is all happening down here in my yard?
And like I told you, there's a good possibility that's what's going on there. It remembered your scent from up there at Fidelity, and since you only live a mile away from Fidelity in the first place, there's a strong possibility that it cruises through your neighborhood all the time. Yeah, maybe it picked up your scent when it was in that area of your house, and now it knows where you live. Maybe that is what's at the root of all this.
And it's like I explained to you, it's only certain houses. It's my neighbor's houses on either side of me and mine, and mine's in the middle, and then it's directly across the street, and that's the house that backs up into the soccer area, which backs up into the wooded area that starts to go up the hill. And mind you, there's more streets back there with houses on them, but they're kind of dark and desolate back there. And there are wooded areas that you can travel through all across those streets to get back up the hill. And it's like I said, I wonder if it just completely depleted its prey up there, and now it's coming down into the neighborhood and picked up my scent. Because it's just around our houses here. It's like a little circle.
I hope that's not what's going on here, but there's a strong possibility that that is what's going on. Well, having said that, Susan, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I do. To people that are just cruising YouTube and come across your channel and they listen to some of these interviews and they're sitting back and they're laughing, thinking, oh, this can't possibly be real, like I used to do. They are real. There's no doubt about it. It will rock your world when you see one. Don't make it angry. Don't try to shoot it. Get away from it as fast as you can and learn some sympathy and some empathy for other people when they tell you about their experiences. That's the most important thing I can tell you. Don't doubt another person. It might just happen to you. And like I said, it might just shatter your world. And it's hard to come back from. And that's the only thing I can tell people.
Well, that's very well said, Susan. Again, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing that experience with us. Thank you so much.
Vic, thank you so much for having me and for speaking to me and helping me through this. I can honestly tell you, you probably helped save my sanity, and I can't thank you enough.
You know you're welcome. If you ever relapse or need help, you know how to find me. I'll always be here for you. Have a great night, okay?
All right, you too, and thank you. Bye.
Bye.